function of a government is not limited only to the maintenance of law and order. The government should also take the responsibility of people's welfare. It should create social conditions that enable citizens to live with dignity. It should formulate policies to raise people's standard of living. People should be supplied with nutritious food. Public health should be improved. Such are the lines along which these principles guide the governmental policies. The directive principles expect that India should help create world peace and should form its foreign policy accordingly. The directive principles in this category also cover objectives like free and compulsory primary education, prohibition of liquor, development of cottage industries, protection of historical monuments, etc.
Articles 36 to 51. Directive principles of state policy are taken from the Constitution of the Ireland. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar described these principles as noble features of the Constitution. The directive principles constitute a very comprehensive social, economic, and political program for a modern and welfare state.
Okay, so basically, what are directive principles? Directive principles of state policy, which is also called as DPSP. Okay, where it is mentioned, where do we have all these directive
Ma'am, in the
principles?
part 4 of the Indian
Yes,
Constitution.
in the part 4 of the Indian Constitution. Part 4 of the Indian Constitution.
From Article 36 to
36 to
51.
51.
Very good. From Article 36 to 51. Okay. So now these directive principles of state policies, which is taken from the Constitution of the welfare. I can't see the letter. Okay, of the island. Now, these principles basically are described by whom? By Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
B.R. Ambedkar.
Please underline the same. You might get a question, objective question based upon this. Okay. These principles are mentioned in his novel, which is novel features of the Constitution. The directive principles, it is very comprehensive. Okay. And what are the subjects on which the directive principle focuses? It focuses usually on social, economic, political program for modern and for the welfare of the states. Okay. So whatever directive principles we have, it mentions or it covers all the social, economic, and political subjects, and for whom? For the welfare of the people. Okay. So that is the basic idea of the directive principles. Have you understood this? The directive principles?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Like fundamental rights, the directive principles of state policy are non-binding in nature, which means they are not enforceable by the courts for their violation.
Okay. So now, you know, we have fundamental rights, right, given to each and every citizens. Now, if we compare fundamental rights with directive principles, usually directive principles are not binding in nature. Please underline this. Okay, that means it is not enforced on the citizens to follow the directive principles. And if at all any citizen fails to follow that, he or she will not be punished for violation of these directive principles. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And we had just now discussed the list of fundamental rights. Right to freedom, right to education, right to equality. Yes. Constitutional and educational rights. Right? Right to property. These are all the fundamental rights. Let's go on to the next page. Yes, continue.
Shall I continue reading?
Yes.
As you studied in the previous term, the Constitution provides for the fundamental rights and duties that every citizen is entitled to and fulfill. Similarly, the Constitution provides to the central, every state and local governments certain guidelines that work towards looking after the welfare of the people.
Yes.
The directive principles of the state policy find a place in part in
4.
Yes, ma'am. In part 4 of the Constitution of India, they serve as a policy directives for the future governments. The framers of the Constitution borrowed certain principles from the Declaration of the Rights of Men and Citizens, Declaration of American Independence, and the Constitution of Ireland.
Okay. Now, as you all know, we all have fundamental rights. Yes, children? Isn't
Yes,
it?
ma'am.
Which
Yes,
we
ma'am.
follow. So similarly, every state, okay, every central state or local government, they have certain guidelines which they need to follow for the welfare of their own states. Okay. So directive principle of state policy, as we have already studied that, where is it mentioned? It is in part 4 of the Constitution. And which article? From which article?
36 to 41.
36 to
Very good. From
51,
36
not
Sorry, 51.
41.
36 to 51.
51.
Yeah. The frames of the Constitution borrowed certain principles. Now, as you all know, when we were framing our Constitution, it was not wholly and solely made by us. We had borrowed certain things from different countries. Like, as if you will go for in grade 8, you will study that while preparing the Constitution, while framing the Constitution, we took certain things from US, certain things from France, okay,
They mentioned Ireland also right now.
and Ireland. Yes. So including all these, we borrowed from there, and then we created our own Constitution. Got it? Now let's
Yes.
understand the meaning of the Constitution according to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
Yes. Ma'am, shall I continue?
Yes.
Meaning, according to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the directive principles should be made on the basis of all legislative and executive action. These are not enforceable by a court of law and therefore non-justiciable, unlike the fundamental rights. Policymakers have to bear these in mind when they work out their plans and projects, just as they would refer to the fundamental rights. Most of the principles have already been implemented over the years. For example, a village panchayat exists in every village. Judiciary and executive are separate organs of government.
Yes. So, according to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, we should also have the directive principle, okay? Like we had done for fundamental rights, legislature and executive. As you all know, we have a list of principles, plans for fundamental rights and how it has to be implemented. So similarly, we can do it for directive principle just for the welfare of each and every people and each and every state. And for this, it is not that it was just introduced now, it was implemented years ago. Like earlier we had villages, okay? So what we had in the villages, we had panchayats who would do justice, who would resolve the issues, okay, if it was considered in rural areas. What about urban areas? In urban areas, we have the judiciaries, yes, who work as the organs of the government as well as the executive. What does judiciary mean, children? What does judiciary mean? Who will tell me? Judiciary includes what?
Ma'am, I think so we had these terms.
Yes, you already have studied this. What does judiciary mean?
Justice.
What?
It is the
Yes.
it is the judicial or authorities of country, ma'am.
What? Authorities in what sense?
Ma'am, I think so they are in justice courts.
Yeah,
Justice
Yes,
courts.
courts. You know, judiciary means the courts are involved. And how many courts do we have? District court, high court, and
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court.
and among all these court, which is the like the powerful one?
Supreme Court.
Supreme